17th, and NEVIC Zooms are continuing here, and we're very happy to have Jim Sargent join us from deep in the heart of Texas. Just, I guess, right in Irving is where I think the club claims to be based. And so Jim is with the Vintage Radio and Phonograph Society, and they have been having radio fun since 1974, so 46 years. They've been in the business of building bonds amongst the community and having swap meets and auctions and sharing stories and sharing restoration techniques. And we're glad to have them on board. And, it's just, further confirmation for us that even though, we're up here in our little corner of the world, the country is just full of people who are passionate about radio. And I know VRPS has some great guys, and they have some super events. In addition to being president, I believe, currently, Jim, you're also a successful auctioneer, runs his own auction business, and specializes in, guess what else, antique radios. And Jim hosts, if you remember, Jim, we had Tom Kleinschmidt on a few Zooms ago. He had joined us because the fellows out at Archie, in lieu of having Radio Fest this year, have been looking at putting some Zoom together themselves, and I guess they are doing it, which Tom was so impressed with what we're doing up here. Actually, he's lucky that he'd be willing to even broach the subject after witnessing some of the stuff we do. But, he spoke very complimentary of you, and you've been running the Zoom Fest auction for several years for those guys, and it brings in some bucks for them, and they can't speak enough to your professional approach and the good results that you have there. So thanks for coming on tonight. We appreciate it. And you could probably also tell the folks that, yes, when we last spoke, I look better on radio than I do on Zoom, but I'm anyway. And you have a connection to New Hampshire, don't you, Jim? You had mentioned to me at one point in time.
Well, up in that area, I have a daughter that lives in the D.C. area. So that's about as close to New Hampshire as I get. Other than my family comes from Maine. Back,
so I was off by a state.
Yeah, back many generations, but that's where the Sargent clan hails from originally after they came from England. So.
The great state of Maine. All right. You and Joe Devonshire, good company up there. So anyway, Jim, maybe you could just give us a little background. I know you guys have been doing some Zoom events, or I have a Zoom event coming up. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, because of the situation down in the Metroplex area, you've had to put your events on hiatus this year, it seems. And so just in general, how have you guys been coping with this? And maybe you could just give us a little background on the club, maybe how many members you have and
Sure.
What you guys see going on in your neck of the woods with the club.
Yeah, I'd be glad to do that, Paul. First, thanks for the invite. I appreciate it. Anytime I get to talk about antique radio and radio in general, or tubes or anything else, I know your program was called Tube Talk, and that's been many years ago. I was on with you for that, and so it's still active down here. I hear a lot of complaining because we're not generally getting together. I say generally because we missed, let's see, we had a January and a February meeting before all of this hit. March is supposed to be our, what we call a spring auction, and it got canceled. And then April, May, June, July, all of those were canceled. And in fact, the meeting place where we host our meetings, the facilities have been removed from public use for the remainder of the year and into some part of next year. It's kind of sad, but that's, it is the nature of the beast. We get it for free. So it's a good facility, and it's located in the center of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So it's a good travel for everybody. Those that live in Irving, it's real close. Those of us that live an hour and a half away, I'm actually in Granbury, which is southwest of Fort Worth. So I'm about 65 to 70 miles from where we host our meetings in Irving. But in this area, that is not a big deal. We drive that pretty regularly. So it's still a ways, but we enjoy it. But all the meetings were canceled. We have started having Zoom type meetings, and we've covered a number of topics. The last one we did, one of the first ones we did was on Atwater Kent early breadboards, and specifically the Model 2 or the 3945 AK. So, and there was several of us that have a variation of that board, or they made apparently a long board and a short board version, and we went through those kind of discussions, and we showed them, and we talked about difference. It was well attended. We had, I don't know how many people are on. I haven't seen the participant number, but we had 35 people on that one.
Well, that's great.
And so that was just the hunger. I think the people, we typically have about that at every meeting. When we have a normal monthly meeting, we're in the 30 to 35 range, sometimes a little bit more, but that's about where we are. So we're pleased with that kind of attendance. Another meeting we had just this past weekend, Paul, was more of a show and tell. We like to do that at least once a year, and it saves the program director a month on the menu from
Yes,
trying to
it does,
figure
doesn't
out.
it?
Yeah, I mean, it works real well to do it, and people like to show off what they found recently, or what they've been working on, or so it's a real good way to share and show an interest. And I didn't know. I heard John when I first came on talking about collecting foreign sets and the Telefunctions and the Grundigs and those kind of things, and that's good to know. We have a few people around here that's all they specialize in as well. So I mean, and then everybody has a specialty of some sort. So we get a chance as we talk to and we have roughly 225 members that are, I would call paid. So in fact, we're sending out our renewal notice here in about 2 weeks. I was just on the phone with the editor of our publication, who's going to be mailing that out just before this call, making sure all that's going like it's supposed to be. And we're expecting, we pretty much hold at a 2.25 to 2.5 range of I started to say employees, but boy, none of them work. No, that's not
if
true.
they all pitched in and did the work, that would be, because it's kind of the usual 10% if you're lucky in some of these clubs, as far as getting folks to actually step up to the plate and help out at a swap meet, or contribute an article to the publication, or do a little, something extra at the meet, count the money, whatever. And I was going to ask you how many folks you had, so you answered that question. And I think at one point in time, wasn't the VRPS sort of like the Southwestern Club? Did you have a?
Yeah.
And then you just kind of focused more on the Texas approach.
Yeah, when it was first formed in 74, and I became a member in 75. So I'm fairly early on, but in 74, and in fact, when I joined in 75, it was still known as the Southwest Vintage Radio and Phonograph Society. And then a few years later, they got to be a cumbersome name. And we dropped the Southwest, and our Houston counterpart came on board, a sister club in Houston, and they became the Houston Vintage Radio Association. But we've kept the VRPS, the Vintage Radio and Phonograph Society, although I got to tell you, we are, in our early days, we were heavily focused on phonographs. Now we are heavily focused on radios, with a few people that have a few of both. But the phonograph collectors have seemed to wane, or at least drop off. Again, we have some folks that are have very good collections of both, and some sizable phonograph collections. But most of our guys are in the radio, I think expense has a lot to do with it. You can put a lot more on a table or on a shelf than you can put on phonographs from the wallet and from a display as well. So
that's true. One of the things we've recently, within the last couple of years, re-engineered our name to try to modernize our approach a little bit. So we went from the old NEARC, which was New England Antique Radio Club. We are now NAVEC, which is New England Vintage Electronics Club. And one of the things that, we're starting to see more and more of, and, at least in my case, certainly, you find some of the younger folks who are involved in these come to our meets and our events. For them, component stereo systems, Kenwood Pioneer, Marantz, Harman Kardon, that was their antique radio. That was their sort of entree into the world of AM, FM tuning and high fidelity records. And, the folks, yes, we're still out there with our, multi-band shortwave and AM sets, but, every generation has their own idea of what an antique is. And as I get older, I'm finding it hard to come to grips with the fact that, a Denon turntable is an antique. But then again, I'm rapidly becoming an antique in my own right. So I guess I best come to grips with that. So in any event, Jim, maybe you could tell us a little bit. I know you do some auctioning. You've done online auctions. You do in-person auctions. Just is sort of a general state of the hobby. Where do you think things are going? I mean, personally, my own opinion is it seems as if as some folks are paring down their collections, there's a lot of good stuff that's becoming available, and it's pretty reasonable. But in many cases, it's certain sets aren't commanding the premiums that they would maybe 10, 15 years ago. I don't know what you see when you're doing your auctioning. Is it a function more of rarity, or is it a function of electronic sophistication, or is it just you'll find that price sometimes is driven by the buyer. For example, I know a guy who's a pretty good restorer, and he just had this obsession with getting one of those little majestic Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer sets, because his mom had given him one that he knocked off his bedroom nightstand when he was a kid. And he was just dying. He was going to find one of those in pretty respectable condition and restore it. And while I won't say he would pay anything, but he was the type of buyer who would probably pay above what you might say that little 4-tube plastic set is really worth. So maybe you could give us your perspective on what you're seeing at the auction table these days.
Yeah. That's a real good question. And I've had that actually asked by other people regarding the auctions that I do. I do, as Paul was saying, all of my auctions until this year, actually in December of last year, I started it, have been a combination of live internet auctions. So I basically had the best of both worlds. I had a room full of people. I built an auction house in Granbury, not far from my house, after 20, 25 years of either renting a building in other cities, wherever I could find a place to host a convention or an auction. And I just decided if I was going to do this and have some sanity about it as well, I was going to go ahead and build my own place. So I had a piece of property here in Granbury, and I built a 3,000 square foot building. It is not a multi-use. It is a single use. It has been used for other things, but it was designed to be an auction house. A very open, with the exception of 2 bathrooms, a male and a female, handicap bathrooms, a kitchen, and an internet storage room where items are stored until they're shipped or picked up. It is an open area, and so I've got 90 chairs out, and while I've never had every chair in the house full, I do have a pretty good following. They come out.
We're losing you a little bit there, Jim. I don't know if your internet connection is coming and going, but or if you need to turn your computer a little bit. But
Yeah, could you hear me now?
Yep, you're back.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I had somebody trying to FaceTime in, so I was deleting them out of the picture there.
There you go.
So I have a combination. What I like to do and what I'm really fond of are personal interaction auctions where somebody is live in the seats. But I realize also that if I filled all 90 seats, I would still be missing an audience that could be worldwide. So I started doing live internet auctions, and some of you may have jumped in on one of those, and encourage you if you've never done them. They are actually fairly easy once you get past the fear of being out there and maybe missing a bid. But you can hear me. I do audio. I used to do video and audio, but the bandwidth was just terrible requirements. So I do audio only, so you can hear me actually auctioning an item and you can bid at the same time. I have a person sits right next to me who is taking the internet bidding. And so he's bidding as if you were in the room. He bids for you and the other 200 people that might be on the internet. And I do have them from Canada and I've had 42 states on a single auction at the same time. Never had all 50, but I do run from coast to coast, which is a good thing. And so that works out well. And it gets me from my consignor who I work for. It gets them the best price for items. Now, so what is the price of items these days? I've actually seen a really stable sales in the last year, 9 months to a year. And I attribute a lot of that to the fact that if people are hosed up, they're being quarantined or they're being locked in their rooms, and they want to get out and they want to go to Kutztown. And Tom, I'm glad you're making it, or whoever's going to be going up there tomorrow. They want to go to the swap meets and they're not able to do it. And the only outlet they have is via the internet in a lot of cases. I know some people have tried to do some swap meets and all, and that works for localized groups in small areas. We've even done one with the radio club, and we've got one at my building on the 26th of September. We'll host a flea market as such, just to get people out of the house, and they can wear masks and do all the kind of stuff they want to do. But I've got a 10,000 square foot parking lot, and if it doesn't get used by somebody, it's just concrete going to waste. So I've opened it up.
That's plenty of room for social distancing right there, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Well, and
so you don't have any problems with that?
No, there should not be. And we are pretty mild in this area, I guess. So from the impact of the virus, it still has an impact on us, but it's fairly mild. I have shut down my live auctions, and I've already told people I won't do one till next year now. My next sale is October the 4th, and it's already been deemed an internet-only sale, which I've done. This will be my 9th one this year, and that's only because I've got so much stuff coming at me right now.
So Jim, I was just curious when you had mentioned that you had got some participation from all over the world. Did you know the farthest you guys ever shipped a radio out to somebody, or the most remote place you ever took a bid from?
Yugoslavia.
There we go.
It's out there.
I took a bid. I didn't ship. He didn't win. Obviously, shipping is an impact.
For him, yes.
I do ship to Canada often, at least once or twice on every sale. Other than that, California and New Jersey and all the points in between. Virginia, I've got several bidders in Virginia. All of the Midwest, I ship a bunch of stuff that direction.
Now, one of the other features on this is the buyers can preview. You usually have, don't you have a preview prior to the actual auction itself? So it's sort of at your leisure, as opposed to being there in person where you might feel rushed or there's a crowd. So if you were looking for your Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer Majestic, you can really scroll through and look things over up and down, and maybe you find the 3 or 4 sets. So rather than sort of a pure auction experience with a quick walkthrough where you might just see something come up and you have to decide on the snap, that's something I'm going to go for, you could go in there with sort of a little target and say, okay, these are 3 or 4 things. This is my budget, and you have a little bit more of a strategy. So I think from that respect, it might actually be a little better experience for the purchasers too.
Yeah, and I offer, we will post for the October 4th sale, we'll post them on the Friday, before the 26th. So the people that come to the swap meet will be able to preview live the stuff, because it'll be, the auction building's right there. And then in everybody on the internet, they can see all of the items. There'll be 400 and almost 30 items, something like that, in the sale, or lots. I call them lots, but there'll be 430 lots. And I get I field, and the reason I post that a week ahead of time is because I do field, Paul, a lot of calls during that week. I'm at the auction house almost all day, all week, fielding calls, and somebody will say, I want to see the inside of the back right corner of that radio, or this, or show me this, give me a view I didn't see. So I'll FaceTime with a lot of those people and actually talk them through and tell them, or test it. If they want me to test something, I do testing. If it's capable, if I've got the capability, if they know how to use that oscilloscope and they want me to set it up in a certain way, or if they have that frequency scanner and they want me to run it, I do all of that kind of stuff. So it gives them a little personal touch.
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, that's, for guys in this type of hobby, the serious collectors, that's right up their alley. The worst thing to do is to look at 3 or 4 pictures online and you wonder, A, is it going to get here in one piece? B, what am I not seeing? Or, C, has it really been refinished or not? They say the tubes are original. Well, are they? So they go into it with a little bit more confidence. And I just have to ask, I mean, and everybody has their own, their own holy grails in this hobby. What have you seen anything particularly rare or unique that you would say that's passed through your auction in the last, say, year or so? What are some things anything stick in your head as far as something particularly rare or unusual that you came across?
I've sold some really interesting radios, and I think I'll tell you about 2. One in my last sale. If you went to the Muckow auction, and I imagine some of you folks may have attended that back in 2000. That was a great sale, and one of Ralph's prized possessions was a Zenith custom cabinet, 1938, with a 15-tube Zenith shutter dial in it. It was in a cabinet that had hand-carved boy and girl on each side of the cabinet. I sold that I sold it from the guy that bought it at Muckow. He paid $1,900 at the Muckow auction for it. I sold it for $2,900. So now I was hoping and expecting it to go higher than that, actually, but I was still the lady that consigned it was very happy that that her husband's purchase made a profit. So that was a nice item. But probably the rarer piece that I sold 2 years ago was an original theremin, and it came out from the original owner. It was sold to a party in Oklahoma. They drove to Chicago and bought it from this 90-year-old man who had originally bought it. and it was immaculate. It was totally original, speaker and everything, and working. We're very fortunate. We have a guy down here in the Metroplex who is a master theremin player. In fact, plays for the symphonies, including the Chicago Symphony. He plays a theremin in that, and he's been to several of our conventions as banquet entertainment, and it's just incredible.
Remarkable.
What you can do with your hands without touching something. And so I sold that. They had a $10,000 reserve. So I told them I would not take a commission until, if it only brought 10,000, but I'd take my commission out of the portion that was above that. So my goal was to get above that. It went for 12,000. And the guy flew in from Florida and rented an Escalade and drove it back home.
Gee, I guess he kind of wanted it.
Yeah, he was actually a professional musician that played with symphonies.
Interesting.
And he had some experience, but not a tremendous amount. So he was going to get trained to use it and in the symphony.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, it was a good item.
That's a great story too. Just I can just imagine what it brought to him. Because he was the guy who actually went through the whole thing and then came home with it. So I mean, we talk about it and we're kind of like, wow, that's neat. But for somebody who it has that significance to, God bless him. Good luck to him.
Yeah. Does anyone remember what John Terry's theremin went for? He let us play it in his area there. Anybody remember what that went for at his auction?
I don't.
Okay.
No. We have a fellow up here, Jim. He used to be the publisher of, if you recall, Antique Radio Classified.
I know John.
John. He has a he's downsizing, so he sells some things on the web, but he has just the range of stuff he has is what's so amazing, from quack medicine gadgets to radio stuff and publications and pretty remarkable stuff. So he's an interesting man, and he's a guy who has a great feel, for all the peripheries of the radio hobby. One thing I would ask, and we'll probably go to some questions and see if the group has anything to share or show or tell. I have something to show tonight. What's your read on Catalan? Is it eye candy at this point, or does it still have the draw that it once had? Because for a while, Catalan really drove people to shows, and people were really keen on having a piece. And we recently had a piece that was raffled at one of our auctions. It was very well received, but it just didn't seem to get quite the buzz that it had in years past. I don't know what you guys are seeing down your way.
Yeah, Catalan's, it doesn't hold the dollar value that it did 10 years ago, when a bullet would have brought 2,000 to 2,500, but it'll still bring 12 to 15. I've sold several Catalans. It is still the eye candy piece, okay? Yeah. But the whole market is somewhat soft. But it is still, I think, still good. And I think Catalans, if you don't pay 2,000 to 3,000, you still have an investment that'll, if you're buying. And I tell people, and I may be stepping on somebody's toes, but I tell people, if you buy this stuff because you're investing in it for your retirement, you're in the wrong business. You do it because you love it. And if you make money when you sell it, great. But that should not be your focus. Yeah,
that's about it. No, I hear you, and honestly, I generally tend to buy things I like and I can afford, or I don't have a brand or a style or a tube count, But generally, if it makes me a little happy when I have it and get to playing and getting to look at good, well, that's a win for me. And to your point, if it makes a little money at the end of the day, that's for whoever might sell it, or if I ever sell it. And again, so let's talk about Mr. Spivey. He occasionally sneaks out a little piece of Catalan, reasonably priced, some very nice lookers. And, those aren't the sets that are electronically, there's not a lot of wizardry. A 6-tube set is, maybe what you see as far as some of the higher tube counts. But, I know that Bendix has a couple of Catalan sets. There's one greenish white that's just really sharp. And if the dial looks nice, it really pops. And if it's lit, it's even more so. But I mean, I'm almost afraid if I even had an opportunity at a great price to get one, I'm the type of guy, I would trip over the cord and it would come down, and hit the cat and wind up in about 35 pieces that I could never get back together again. I'm almost afraid of it. It's so nice, so it has no place in my home, so in any event, well, that's funny you mentioned the 26th, because we have an event also on the 26th in Brookline, New Hampshire. So we'll be doing much the same as you guys. Masks, social distancing, respect the other person's space. But again, we hope to sort of satiate that urge to get out and about and see some stuff in person and, pick up some parts, find some things that you might not be able to find online or get pointed in the right direction. So hopefully you are successful and we're successful with ours as well. So I would just, at this point, John, we go around the group. If anybody had something they would like to show, or anybody have a question for Jim as far as Texas radio collecting and VRPS, or something related to an auction or a particular radio or something he may have seen or not seen, let's throw open the doors and see what people have to say.
Well, I'll throw my hand in because I have a couple of follow-up questions for Jim here.
Okay.
So a couple of things came to mind is that as Paul mentioned, we're branching out by expanding our charter to vintage electronics. What has your club sort of faced the same thing? Perhaps to attract younger people. What have you guys done in that regard?
Yeah, boy, you're right on target. We've done exactly the same thing. We've tried to. We even had a contest category on audio, tube audio, that kind of stuff, to try to enhance or to get that new collector, the younger collector, involved. I got to tell you, for the most part, that has not been successful. We have a lot of older guys instead that like the tube audio, but it has not. For the most part, there are obviously exceptions to the rule, but most of our members still tend to be in their 60s, through their 80s and beyond. We've talked to Houston. We meet with them often. The president down there and I talk often about how do we grow the organization or grow the hobby. And we're finding that we're growing it among the same people that we have.
Very interesting.
Age-wise, I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. There's a Boston Audio Society, and that's sort of their stock and trade is, the stereo components type scene. And we share a link with them on their website. I have talked to one or two of their members who have come to our meets, but I thought if they knew a little bit more about us, we might see some more of them. But they seem to be in their own universe, and they don't generally tend to fan out. And
Paul, to that regard, I have seen the greatest increase in my revenue stream from tubes, and almost not entirely. A large chunk of that is audio tubes are commanding a very high premium right now.
Sure. For amplifiers, for musicians, guys who want Silvertone amps with tubes, and yes.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep. There is actually a store. We are fortunate enough in the greater Boston area. There aren't too many of these left. There's an outfit called You Do It Electronics. It is now a second generation company, And while they sell a little bit of everything, they have equipment for your repairs. They have soldering irons, all manners of tools. They sell television. They sell two-way radio equipment. They sell all that stuff. But they have lots of different cables and connectors, and they sell diodes and caps and all kinds of stuff. So we're fortunate to still have them. They do a web business. They also have a storefront. They've actually brought back 2 display cases. Now, they got rid of all their tubes years ago, sold them all off, got rid of all the radio and TV tubes, everything, even the audio tubes. They're now actively stocking and selling at a pretty brisk rate tubes for vintage amplifiers amongst the musician community up here. So, it was just kind of funny when I went back in and there's a couple of displays, and I asked the guy, I said, is there anything in there that I'd want? He says, no. He says, but if you played a guitar, that's your box right over there.
There you go. Yep. So
at least they're keeping the tubes going, and they're keeping many of them restore their own stuff too. So, it's another way that the sort of the flame of the hobby, stays lit. So we'll give them a pat on the back for all that.
How about microphones, Jim? Are RCA ribbon mics holding up pretty well still in the 1200?
They do 12. You're talking about 1200 price wise, or what?
Yeah.
Actually, probably a little steeper than that, Tom. Ribbon microphones in general, but broadcast mics in particular are definitely sought after. There is a clientele out there that, it's fighting 2 markets. One is it's sort of like the Coca-Cola collector or the Rudolph collector. You're fighting the novelty piece of it, but you're fighting the people that actually want to use them. The broadcast, the entertainer, the person that's on stage, whether he's playing a harmonica or a guitar or just sings at the local outing, once a week. It is it's a live market. I love doing microphones. I recently picked up a 77 from my own collection. I have a significant collection of mics, and that was a crowning one that I've been looking for. So I've got a DX now, a 77, to go with the 44 and all the other ones that you really like to have.
Mics have a wonderful mystique about them. We were lucky enough to have Bob Paquette at a meeting of the AWA many years ago, and we all just sat around at his feet and listened to his mic stories. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Now, Tom, is that the fellow who has his museum up? Was it up in Milwaukee?
I think so, yeah.
Yes, I've heard of him.
Sort of the definitive book on microphones too.
I've seen some shots of his museum, and it's just awe-inspiring. I was on the radio one night, and so the fellow who hosted me, he had a call off the air, and somebody. And again, it's everybody. People have their own view of what's easy to get and what's not. So I think his son works at a radio station somewhere in the Eastern Seaboard. Well, he said, all I want to get him is a real NBC microphone with the NBC logo on him, something from maybe the 40s that was used in a real radio station. You think you could find one for $100, $150? It's like I don't even see them, nevertheless, to find them at those prices because, broadcast museums want them. There are all types of media outlet related museums who want that type of stuff. So, and it's a finite supply in a market that, would easily suck up anything that comes. Here's Tom. He's got something he wants to show us here.
There are just eye candy microphones like this beauty that you just have to have on your operating table or on your in your collection, and I just can't resist them. They're wonderful. The old carbon mics, but especially in a stand that's pretty.
That's very nice. Very nice to look at. And who hasn't seen all the old time radio pictures? Of all of the different, whether it's whether it's an announcer or the radio show itself or Frank Sinatra, somebody's, performing in front of some beautiful piece of microphone. And, it just, it's radio. I mean, I think so especially for the average man, that's sort of their vision of what radio was a vintage performer with a great microphone, and you're on the Blue Network tonight.
The history
everybody's tuning in.
The history of early microphones is very interesting. Many of the great musicians, the singers, were terrified of microphones.
Yes.
And so the microphones were made both beautiful, and they were often hidden under a blanket or under a cover so that they wouldn't have to look at the darn thing when they were singing.
Interestingly enough, too, I heard that in some cases, many of the actors who later came over to do old-time radio programs had a hard time adapting to the studio setting, and they would build little boxes around microphones and put the microphone they either wanted to get too close, so they started roaming around, and it was a challenge to get them to actually, and meanwhile there were guys who were seasoned radio vets, who knew exactly what to do and how to perform. So they do really sort of typify the industry, I think, and obviously that's what people were listening to, their nifty consumer radio sets, something coming through those beautiful mics. So,
Tom, a story on a 44. I sold a really nice original RCA 44 mic a year and a half ago or something like that, and it was a live sale. So I actually used the microphone in the sale.
Wonderful.
And it was, it just made me seem like I had a great voice, but I don't. But it was a wonderful. And as soon as I sold it to the guy, and it brought 3,000, I got off it. I unplugged it. I don't want to use this thing no more, But I did use it for the first 100 items I guess I sold, and then I sold that item itself, and then moved on. But that was a great sounding microphone, and I like to do that with a lot of early mics. If I'm using them, I'll hook it up to my PA, and actually, if it's usable. I've never done that with a double button, so I need to pull out my Western Electrics and see what they do.
Yeah, that would be great. I wonder, can you handle Enigma machines? Do any of people interested in an Enigma?
It would probably be somebody that was on the internet. I don't know of anybody locally that would even be able to spell Enigma.
Interesting. Anybody else have any?
If you happen to have a customer that's interested, I just happen to have one nearby.
Send him Tom's way. You know where to look us up.
I'll let you know, Tom.
Excellent.
Bruce.
I see.
Yeah, it seems like the conversation is drifting towards microphones. I recall, I think Tom Pereira bought a ribbon microphone from me one time years ago at a ham fest. I'm not sure if it was you or not, but it disappeared fast.
They don't last long on the tables, I'll tell you.
So I had one. I don't know. I have this microphone as a display. I'll show you what it is.
Yeah.
It's an Electro Voice Cardine 1 model 726. So
That's
a little
beautiful.
stand.
That's a beaut.
That's beautiful.
How much do you think that thing weighs, Bruce?
Probably about 10 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice heft, nice sound.
Yeah, I've not used it. It's got a plug on it, but basically it just decorates the shack here.
Bruce, send it down here and I'll use it for you.
Okay. So there you go.
When the time comes, you want to part with it, Bruce. You know where to go for an auction.
Yeah, I know. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.
Anybody else with a story, a comment, a question about auctioning? Anything you've ever wondered what goes on behind the scenes? It sounds like an awful lot of work, and probably the accounting is probably the most daunting as far as cataloging everything, getting everything at its, in its range, figuring out reserves, final sales, and then the processing, the packing, the charging of the charge cards. Do you use an online service for that type of thing? As far as, do people pay credit, or they send you checks, or how do you handle payment on all your online auctioning?
That a good question again, Paul. I'm about as easy to deal with, and the people that deal at my auctions will tell you this as well. I will take everything from cash to a good check. If you drop it in the mail to me, and I have one person he's in Wisconsin, and at the end of the sale, I send out an invoice. I blast an invoice to everybody who won something. And he immediately writes me a check, and in 3 or 4 days later, I get a check in the mail. Credit cards, I have migrated to a large extent to PayPal. I don't like taking your credit card, and it's the hardest thing for me to tell people when they say, "Well, I gave it to you last time." Yeah, I got rid of it too.
That's right.
I don't want your credit card any longer than I have to have it, and then I shred it. And I do that every time. But most people, especially since I've gone online, I send out an email blast with the invoices, and within an hour, I probably have half the people PayPal. And last time I had over 100. I sent out.
We even take PayPal up here now for member dues. It's very convenient, and most people seem to be using it. And a lot of guys who like to buy on eBay or don't feel comfortable, with some of maybe the smaller online businesses they deal with for whatever it is, whether it's electronics or any other type of consumer goods, don't really want to have to call up and say, "Here's my MasterCard."
Yeah.
Wonder who's listening on the line or who might find it. And some people, while they're very honest, they just don't perceive what risk, is entailed by somebody sitting on top of your credit card. And again, even I know in a lot of the agreements that Visa and MasterCard put out now with, different companies that use them when you signed your cardholder agreement, it restricts you from maintaining that information. You have to, and after we're charged, it's gone. We have to shred it. We have to do something with it. So, but, it certainly helps facilitate, an online business. Tom has something else here. What's the call? Does that have call letters on it?
Yeah, this is a microphone that I found at a ham fest, W1BTZ. The call letters are beautifully, I don't know what you'd call it, cut out of metal up here. And the microphone itself is a beautiful double button, and the stand is magnificent. I think that this stand might have been in a fire or something, because the very strange finish. I doubt that it was supposed to be that way, but it turns out to be, I think, my favorite microphone. It's pretty big, as you perhaps can see.
That is remarkable.
And it's really a very, very interesting mic. And it sounds good still with those, you don't have to bang on it with a hammer. The granules are still pretty loose. A lot of fun to go on the air with a thing like this in front of you.
That is awesome, Tom.
Yeah, there's a fellow who does some of the NJARC Zooms, and I know sometimes he kind of goofs in that, he's not really using the microphone, though he pretends to be, but he does tend to collect microphones, and the whole crowd gets a big kick out of, he sits there basically down at his ham station in his basement, and people will ask him a question just to see what microphone he has on that particular week. So it's kind of fun stuff. And I mean, if it didn't work out as a microphone, that could probably, it's big enough it looks like it'd be a tennis racket.
It's just about the right shape.
Probably weighs about 25 pounds, but that's another story. So let's see. Anybody else going around the board here? Something to pitch in? George is raising his hand here. Hello, George.
Yeah, hi. I just had a quick question for Jim. How do you handle shipping? Do you guys deal with it? Do you have a shipping service that comes in and handles things, or what?
George, I made a decision a long time ago that I was not in the shipping business, and I wasn't going to do it. I have a guy that is a radio collector, and David Spivey knows him as well, Randy James. Randy has been a longtime collector and has bought a lot of stuff, and he's seen it shipped to him and realized that he didn't like the way they were shipping. So he went into the business. He does shipping primarily for me, but the contract or the any of the shipping costs or anything is just between Randy and the buyer. And now he has got a very good reputation among the people that we ship to regularly. So I don't personally do it. And that works for everything that can fit inside of a box. But we ship a lot. Randy, out of this last auction, oh gosh, to one person in Ohio, he shipped 7 boxes. And these are boxes that are what I call moving boxes, 3 foot tall, packed. And there were 7 of those. The shipping bill was over $700 for everything. But we don't ship consoles. But what we have been able to do in the past, because we want to sell them and we want to get the right price for them, is work out a deal. And we actually deliver in some cases if we can make it work. I have a guy here in the club that is he's a bachelor, a widower actually, but he is used to driving and traveling and by himself and does that quite often. And so he makes deliveries. I have made deliveries if it's on the way to a place where I'm headed anyway, like Chicago. When I go up and do the Radio Fest, I will drop off and deliver and get compensated to do that, but that's part of the deal. And I think people appreciate it. But the other side is I have people that drive in from a long way off and pick up items. So I've never not sold something because of shipping, or at least I got to say, I don't know of it if I missed a deal because of it.
Right. Well, I'm glad to hear, though, that you've got someone who knows how to pack and ship a radio as opposed to taking it like to, UPS store or something and see it show up as a kit,
Yeah. Randy is good because he hunts for foam rubber out of old seat cushions, and just he stacks it in his garage waiting for my next sale. And then he will slice it with an electric knife, and it just becomes impervious to drop and breakage and all. He's had 2 claims in 5 years, 6 years, 2 claims.
That's an incredible record.
That's great.
There used to be an outfit called Craters and Freighters, and I don't really know if they're still around, but they do all types of goods. And, they were a little bit pricey, but people would ship consoles with them, or, some big Philco 116 or something along those lines. And again, when you get outside the hobby, though, somebody like Randy, I'm sure when he packs it, he knows when that comes out of that package unmolested, that is going to be a big smile. And so it probably puts a little bit extra into that than the kid at the UPS store. But you could do a whole show probably on just how to pack things. I've had things shipped to me in remarkable shape with some of the most bizarre materials, surrounded in double layers of egg crates. But again, I've had people use old foam cushions. I've had people use stuff that looks like industrial equipment might have come with it, whether it was computers, things that were exceptionally heavy, but they save all this stuff and they find the right thing, and you can do it on your own. You can be the amateur, but the thing is, I think if you're laying out especially good bucks, you probably want to make sure it's going to get up to Boston in one piece.
Yeah, and he double boxes things. Yeah, he double boxes everything he sends out. So,
I don't know if I'd ship a cattle, and I'd want to go pick it up myself, but I'd probably get in a car accident on the way.
Yeah.
Looks like Tom has something else.
Yeah, this is a rather interesting.
He's on a roll.
Loudspeaker. It has a couple of little girls up here looking down at the speaker, and it says in German, I can't read it backwards here, but anyway, this
Die
is
Golden Kindersatz.
So something children's time, the golden children's time?
Golden children's time, that's it. And these little kiddies
Wow.
are listening to the loudspeaker. I don't know how well you can see their faces, but they're
Wow,
just
it's
beautiful
fantastic.
little cherubs. And this is the kind of thing that you find at the huge Friedrichshafen show in Germany, things that you never even see in America.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, I wouldn't miss that show, although I had to miss it this year, but things like this turn up at ridiculously low prices. I think this was about $20.
Oh,
And it's just such a neat piece. And it was made in Vienna. The back is sort of interesting, the loudspeaker, but it's moderately heavy, obviously cast in some kind of, I don't even know what, but sort of plaster kind of thing. But something like that is just so much fun to find at this show. If you ever can get to Germany, this is the place to go. Incredible crystal sets that you never see in America and so on. At some point, I'll do a set of pictures of the stuff that shows up at that show, but this is the kind of thing that I just find fascinating.
well,
I think the larger statement from, not only looking at something like that, but even at some of the stuff, you might see early, say late 20s or very early 30s, is that, it was a piece of electronics, but it was produced with an eye, a design eye, but also the aesthetics were prized as well as the function of the item itself. So while, your iPhone may be very sexy, it isn't. It's square, it's plain. It used to be that form and function met in a very unique way during certain periods of time, and early radio was one of them. And that's a gorgeous thing. And of course, Germans noted for not only the technical excellence, but beautiful craftsmanship and a lot of handwork. I work in a business that has something to do with travel, and we still send a lot of people, though not many. We're not sending anybody anywhere this year. But there are German Christmas markets that people love to go to browse and find, whether it's beautiful handmade ornaments or woodwork or nativity sets. And, even though things are mass produced on a huge scale overseas, there is still an appreciation for that. So these people, in some cases, that's their livelihood. They sell at these markets 2 or 3 times a year, and they make a significant enough money that they can run a business on it. So it is very interesting when you see something quite that beautiful.
I've done those markets in Germany, and they are wonderful. A little bit sort of Mickey Mouse stuff, but when you get at home, it's so unique that even though it's mass produced over there, it stands out.
I'm not sure if
home.
on the corollary that the Europeans would find the New England Radio Club meet that extravagant, but in our own way, we like to think we are.
Yeah,
good for our egos.
The Christmas markets are fun. I mean, I did go, and I actually bought a nice gift for, what I'd say, reasonable money for my sister. I was there in December. And
I think a little bit of it is the spirit of the thing too, and it kind of harkens back to open air markets and all that type of stuff too. Nice stuff. Beautiful piece, Tom.
Thank you.
Let's see. Anyone else want to raise a hand, make a comment, question, reaction?
I might throw a couple more back. Oh, well, let's get Carl in there first.
Carl's got something here.
Carl, you muted? I think you muted. There we go.
Tom, does that speaker work?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
What do you like to listen to, Don, Tom? What is it compatible with? What can you hook that puppy up to?
Anything that's about an 8-ohm speaker.
Very nice. Very nice. Multifunctional.
That looked nice with your Drake TR4.
Study in contrast, eh? I love it. All right, well, let's see. I do have something for a show and tell, though it's not particularly related. It's not a Watterson, so I'm not, tied into Texas. One thing I would ask, Jim, we had a fellow on, you may or may not be familiar with them out in California. They have a very active club, and they have their own clubhouse. They're restoring this building. They do a lot of neat things. They also have a very strong relationship with some of the media halls of fames out in California. But we kind of featured a little bit. We try to talk about some things that were particularly West Coast. when you think back to the heyday of radio, well, Chicago was the center for a lot of reasons. It all could ship sort of equidistant to each East Coast, plus the great population centers in the Midwest. But then you'd always find these companies that sort of catered to a certain area. And part of that was, local businessmen who wanted to be in the radio or electronics business. But, they had their own particular flair. So you have your Packard Bell stationized sets and certain manufacturers from the West Coast. The only really manufacturer I know of from down Texas way is Watterson, was a local company down there. Is there anybody else down in Texas we should know about or may not have heard about who was, producing stuff down there? Or were you guys mostly, sort of, getting your things from right north up in Chicago? Or what do you see a lot down there? Certain areas, like we see Philco, we see Silvertone, we see Zenith up here. But I know in certain parts of the country, people tell me Zenith in the Midwest it's all over the place because Zenith was so huge and had such great, local distribution as well as national distribution. Anything uniquely Texas in the radio world other than a Watterson, maybe?
There's not a lot that we don't see down here in the name brand stuff. The Philcos and the Zeniths and the Emersons and they're as much of a collector item around here, and what people see enough of that, and they get a good feel for the different products that were put out by those companies. Dallas itself, there were several companies that were all linked to J.W. Davis, who was the Watterson of Watterson fame. He was the designer and the engineer, the backbone behind Watterson. There's a they made radios under different names, like Dalbar of Dallas was a name for the J.W. Davis Watterson radio. Watterson they were a cheap, really cheap radio made from the 30s, late 30s, 40s, and into the 50s. They made, I think it's 2 transistor radios. Not a lot of radios. We had headquarters, or Dallas headquarters, for Collins Radio here for a while, but nothing was really manufactured here. It was all done in Iowa. But
was
we have
Curtis
a lot
Mathis?
of
Excuse me,
I'm
Jim.
sorry?
Was Curtis Mathis down in Texas?
Yeah,
I know they have sort of a cult following.
Yeah, it did. It's an East Texas organization, and I don't know if Tyler or Kilgore or somewhere around there is where Curtis Mathis was, and it was it was the high-end hand-wired, made type of color TV set when it came out, and I've had a lot of people try to give me or sell me, and then they want to give me a Curtis Mathis TV, and I keep pushing back. No. So yeah, that's a Texas product. I don't know that they didn't have manufacturer plants elsewhere, but I know in East Texas, I think it was Tyler, would be where they had a big manufacturing plant.
Interesting. Well, so last week we had, in addition to our other last Zoom, we had a lot of folks talked about their first radios. So let's see. If I understand, do I understand correctly? You worked for AT&T for many years, Jim, didn't you?
32 years at AT&T after 7 years with Uncle Sam flying C-130s. Yes.
Okay. And so if we try to pin you down here and say, how did you get interested in radio? With all those other things you could have gotten interested in that era. Did you have a set, or was it a grandpa set, or your aunt's, or your dad's, or was there a particular avenue you took to get involved and interested in, whether it was through an amateur set, were you interested in two-way communications, or was it a consumer set? How'd you get started and interested in the radio hobby?
I guess like a bunch of us growing up in the 60s, and I got my ham license when I was 14. And I've always been interested. My dad's my dad was not into electronics. In fact, his favorite saying was, if you can't fix it with a hammer, it's an electrical problem. So, but he cared enough about what I was interested in that he would go to ham radio meetings or drive me before I was driving.
That's great.
To ham radio stuff, to club meetings. And those guys took me under their wing. And if I needed or had a stupid question, they helped me. I built my first transmitter. I still have it. It scares me to death to look at it, thinking I actually used that thing on the air. But I worked the world with it. Then I got away from it when I went to college, and I stayed familiar with it, but I didn't operate at college. And then when I went in the Air Force, and after I got out of pilot training, I got stationed in Little Rock, and I grew up around antiques. My mom and dad my mom particularly were heavy into antiques and junking at the early age. So I got drugged to a lot of places where people would give you things just to make you go away. And a lot of that were radios. And I would take them apart. I had no idea how to put them back together. I eventually learned how to put them back together on my own, and with some assistance of other people that were kind to me. And then I just began to buy them. And before I was married, I had a radio collection, and that was I was married in 77. So I was buying things when I was single, and fixing them and tearing them up and sometimes putting them back together.
That was just part and parcel of tagging on to Jim. You have to take the radios with it.
There you go.
It's funny what you say about your dad, though, kind of, putting up with you taking you to ham markets and flea markets, et cetera. We have a member in the club, and his father couldn't care a whit about radio.
Yeah.
So I'll mention his name because he's written about it in our newsletter. It's nothing I don't think he would get upset at. So Ross Hochstrasser, who, much like John, is a big fan of German sets. But he said it was so bad at some points in time, he would actually have to talk his father into taking him to the dump so that the kid could bring something home. Whereas usually the kid who says, oh, no, his dad, bringing home some more junk, I don't know what he wants to do at the junkyard today. But so it's the roles are reversed. The parents are like, what do you possibly want with any of this stuff? But yet here we are, we're taking him around, indulging him. But, he became a very successful he's a whiz kid when it comes to radio repair. He was the factory rep for Grundig up here for several years as well. So his father's time is well spent. So we talked about firsts not long ago, and I didn't really have my set to show, but I talked a little bit about it. So I have it here with me, and we'll see how it comes out. I don't know how good the camera quality is on my current new computer here. So I have this little Silvertone. Yeah, it looks pretty pedestrian, but to me, this was the first tube set that I ever had any experience with getting something working again that was vacuum tubes. And this would probably be in the early 70s. And my dad's friend, who also worked for the Edison Company with him, who was a fleet mechanic, but he was a radio tech in World War II. This guy fixed TVs, he fixed washing machines, he fixed cars. He was from that generation that if I can get inside there and there's enough room, I can figure it out. And so that whole sort of can-do generation mindset, which now, something breaks or wears out, generally people run up the flag. You can't even bring it anywhere to get repaired. So I kind of admired this guy anyway. And, I have this image of him. I mean, to this day, he had his Vitalist hair. He had a Hanes pocket tee, glasses, and a pocket protector. And I tell you, he meant business. He didn't spend a lot of time on stuff, but he got my Silvertone playing again, and he actually charged me $1.50, which I thought was outrageous at the age of 12. But I think my father and he were trying to show me that you don't get, something for nothing. So this radio actually belonged to my great uncle, and we found it cleaning out his house. And my dad was sort of the opinion, well, I certainly don't want the thing, but, take it home. So we got it playing. And, in a pre-internet era and, broadcast TV, black and white, for me, this thing was a window. I listen to Ernie Howell on WJR. I'm listening to Orioles games. I'm listening to Gene Shepard, New York News. And it's none of the other sets in the house could get it. But strangely enough, with about 25 feet of copper wire, this little Silvertone with 6 tubes was able to pick it up. So long story short, I kept it. It worked. It went down the cellar. You know, I went to school. I got a job. Life goes by. It stopped playing. It was getting dinged up. And I kind of look at it and said, what am I going to do with this thing? Is it worth it? So I thought about all the fun I had with it. So I said, yes, it is. So we got the cabinet refinished and we got the guts done. And it's still a pretty cool little set and it looks pretty cool. So here, we're going to see how this comes out here. You guys tell me.
Oh, yeah.
John, maybe you can help me
you're in pretty
deal
good
with
depth. Keep it about, pull it away just a little bit to your right. Whoops. Now we're looking at you.
Yep. Yeah, I know you lost me. Hang on. I got to get my camera back here. Hang on.
No problem.
And we'll expand the view.
Take your time.
Looking at other things on the computer. So
nice. There we go. Hold it right there.
So the case is pretty sharp. Simple. It's a little Silvertone. It's made by Air King down in Brooklyn, which is kind of neat because you don't see too many things made in Brooklyn anymore. And the chassis is pretty clean in there. 6 tubes. I don't know if you can make out for best reception. Always use recommended Silvertone aerial kits. It has this neat sort of an oatmeal box style AM antenna in there. And when you hook this thing up to a halfway decent, outside aerial, it's not a bad little set. And the cabinet is very 40s. I think this is probably about a 1946.
That's terrific.
Maybe when they just started up production again. So we replaced the grill cloth and all. And I have to say that, it was probably taken out of a Sears warehouse that we have down here. It used to be near Fenway Park. So the whole thing is kind of a neat connection to it as far as my family and the city and all. And probably one of those sets I wouldn't sell, but, honestly wouldn't command a great deal of money anyway. But I'm glad I have it, and it kind of got me started in this most interesting hobby. So in any event, I'm a Zoom late, but that's my show and tell for tonight. So.
There's nothing wrong with that. It was great.
Anyway, well, we're getting close to the wrap-up time here. We usually run these about 1.5 hours or so. Any final comments for Jim other than saying thank you very much for joining us from Texas tonight? We appreciate your insight on the club and on the auction business and being nice enough to answer all our questions.
Hey, Paul.
Yes.
Paul, this is David Spivey.
Yes, sir. David, how are you?
Yeah, I'm sorry for my stick figure. I hope it has nothing to do with my appearance.
Well, I don't know if your camera enabled or not, but it's nice to hear your voice.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you very much for the kind comments, especially about Mr. Jim Liguori, who I met. How many years ago was it, Jim, at St. Stan's Hall? That was in the late 90s, one of the first radio meets I ever went to. And I can remember one of the very first radios I ever bought on the internet, on eBay, was from Mr. Liguori. It was an RCA portable. You remember that, Jim? Shake your head. Yes, you do. Anyway, you guys have a great club. I love your publication. And it's even better since Bruce Phillips cracked the whip and made everybody contribute an article.
Well, you write some articles too, and I always kind of got a kick because I would see your stuff. Sometimes I cruise through the radio attic just looking around what's going on. And then I saw an article. I said, Dave, why is he writing articles for us for? He's down in Little Rock. And then, kind of put 2 and 2 together. And then, interestingly enough, somehow I mentioned your name in some connection, and Jim and Jeanette said, oh, I know David Spivey. It was like you're a celebrity up here. When's the last time you were up north? And you haven't even been up here in a few years, huh?
The craziest thing is from 1978 until 1993, I was CFO for a group of radio stations in North Carolina. We had 2 AM stations and 2 FM stations, 2 in Greensboro, 2 in Raleigh. 15 years in the radio broadcasting business, and I never even thought about buying an old radio until the late 90s when I got back to Arkansas.
And now the rest is history. Now, I bet you're probably looking at some of these microphones we saw tonight and had a few things you may have seen in your travels through
Yeah.
some of those stations in those old storerooms that I bet you wish you had. Huh?
Yeah, no kidding. Back in the 80s and 90s, so you could buy a lot of stuff a lot cheaper.
That's right, because it's all old tech, and who wants that junk anyway, right?
Right.
Except us. Well, David, it was nice to virtually meet you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm sorry the picture didn't pop up, but you didn't miss much.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Good to hear your
All right.
voice.
There's Paul, there's maybe just a couple of quick things before we sign off.
Yes. Yep. So you go ahead, John. Did you want me to just kind of recap Brookline again coming up?
Well, there's just a couple of things for Jim before and then we'll hand off to you as well. First of all, we would not be doing Texas justice without our vintage Texas Instruments calculator. So that would not be fair. And we are a vintage electronics club, and this TI-30 is from the late 70s, and it still works pretty well. And it has good memories for me because that was my first calculator as a child.
John, let me make a story real quick, and I'll make this quick about that. I am currently I've done 2 sales. I'm going to do one more for the widow of the man that invented that calculator.
That's awesome.
Jerry Merriman, if you go on the internet, you can Google him. He was at TI, he worked at TI. He is what is considered a co-inventor, and he was a member of our radio club. And he passed away in January a year ago. And his wife, Phyllis, contacted me and asked me to help dispose of his massive, not so much radio, although some, but more technical engineering. He was a scientist, no college degree, just a pure scientist, a brilliant man. And he gave us a talk one time at our radio club meeting, and he brought the prototypes of the calculator you hold in your hand. He brought he had 2 prototypes. One is now at the Smithsonian, and the other one they wanted, she's wanting to sell. So if anybody's got $250,000 that they want to just laying around, I can tell you how to best use it.
That's awesome.
Well, it's funny because not too long ago we have a little, group that we chat amongst ourselves on. And I think it was Bruce who is one of our ex-presidents and has a pretty good collection himself, was trying to track down for somebody that approached him. They were looking for a particular TI calculator that they had when they were in engineering school, I think, and were just desperate to get one. And, he was putting out his feelers. So it's funny what comes up. We'll find, yes, people are still looking for tube radios, but every now and then, whether it's a Heath kit or something from TI, or whether it's something that's related to, old video games, Atari, all kinds of stuff shows up. And the Texas Instruments is a sort of an iconic company these days, given, where we've come with technology and all. And it was a great start to an industry, really. I used to do math with a pencil,
Yeah, they make fine equipment.
I couldn't do it very well, but I don't know if calculator would help.
Yeah. And sorry, go ahead, Jim.
No, I was just going to say, and that TI was where the first transistor radio was built and sold with Ideal, but it was made in Texas. In fact, the guy that actually was a project manager on that was a member of our club, Paul Smith. And he has now passed away, but he gave a talk and showed us a plexiglass prototype version they had put together. So we've seen lots of neat things come through this area.
That's great.
And Jim,
yes,
just one last question is, if anyone wanted to, observe or participate in your auction, how does one get information on that?
Yeah, sergeantauction.com.
Sergeantauction.com.
You can, I use a service via iCollector.com is the internet provider that I use, the letter I and collector.com. And, but I always have a link on my website to the link on iCollector, but I send out a blast if they contact me. And there's a link on, at sergeantauction.com to just contact me. I'll add you to my link and I sent it out to almost 1,000 people. And not all of them participate in every auction, but it doesn't take but two. So.
Yeah.
And you know what, Jim? While we're on the subject of links, we'd be remiss. Part of Zooming, not only to kind of keep our own camaraderie up and to see what each other are doing and share some of our collections and projects and ideas and suggestions as a club with each other. We've been trying to reach out to different clubs, New Jersey and California clubs, and you folks down in Texas. I'll speak to our webmaster. Would put a link on to VRPS on the NEVEC site, and let people kind of peek in the window down in Texas way. And if you guys want to take a link on the NEVEC site, I'll send you the URL, and keep in touch with us up here in Boston. And if you ever get up this way, post-COVID, we'll get you a nice cold Sam Adams. How does that sound?
Yeah. Well, I missed an opportunity to go to John Terry's once, and before he disbanded and moved a lot of his stuff out of that barn he built. But I've known John a long time, and I wished I'd have made that trip up, and it was just a little bit far north for me.
Especially if it's wintertime.
We do. We also record and put our Zoom meetings on our website, Paul. So, yeah, if you'll send me the link, I'd love to get our webmaster to link to you as well.
Well, beautiful. Jim, thanks very much again. It was nice to hear your voice. Great to see that you've been keeping busy with the hobby, and you look great and you sound great, and I hope you have many more years and many more successful auctions to come. And believe it or not, COVID will end, and things will get back to normal, and we'll be ready.
Sooner the better. I agree.
I hear you.
Thank you.
Well, you take care now.
very
Thanks
much.
again.
It was great having you, Jim. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you, Jim.
Been a lot of
Good
fun,
talking.
folks.
Thank
You
you.
bet.
Good night, all. Bye-bye.
Right.
Bye,
Just
everybody.
a quick reminder
Oh,
for
yeah.
the
Yes,
NEVEC Net tomorrow morning at 3805 Lower Side Bend at 9:30. If anybody wants to be on the air and chat with us some more.
I'll be thinking of you all when I'm at work.
Ditto. But I'll be
I
here.
probably will be far more asleep than the guys on the net, though. I'll need some more coffee with that hour. I don't know. I'm not much of a morning guy.
Well,
Bruce,
especially
all right.
Bruce, are you going to be on tomorrow?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot.
Okay, good.
All right. Take care, all. We'll see you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
All right.
Bye.
Good night, guys.